Once upon a time, in the tumultuous years towards the end of World War II, there emerged a figure who would briefly lead the remnants of Nazi Germany. This was Admiral Karl Dönitz, a man whose story is both fascinating and unsettling. Admiral Karl Dönitz, born in 1891, was a career naval officer who rose through the ranks of the German Navy. As the war raged on, he found himself thrust into a position of unimaginable responsibility. By April 30, 1945, Adolf Hitler was dead and the war was all but lost. Dönitz was appointed as the last leader of Nazi Germany. With the Allies closing in all sides, Dönitz had the unenviable task of surrendering his nation. He recognized the futility of further resistance and sought to prevent unnecessary loss of life. On May 7, 1945, he signed the unconditional surrender of Germany, effectively ending the war in Europe. This marked a turning point in history and brought relief to countless people across the continent. Dönitz's brief leadership was marked by an earnest attempt to prevent chaos in the face of impending defeat. He issued orders to cease all hostilities, ensuring that his forces did not continue to fight a lost cause. He understood that further conflict would only result in more devastation and suffering. However, the story of Admiral Karl Dönitz doesn't end with his surrender. After the war, he was arrested by the Allies and brought to trial at the Nuremberg trials, which aimed to hold Nazi leaders accountable for their actions during the war. Dönitz was convicted of war crimes and crimes against humanity for his role in unrestricted submarine warfare, but he was not found guilty of planning or initiating wars of aggression. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Dönitz's leadership during the final days of Nazi Germany remains a complex and contentious chapter in history. Some argue that he acted with a sense of responsibility and pragmatism, while others see him as a willing participant in the Nazi regime. As the leader of Nazi Germany in the final days, Admiral Dönitz faced immense challenges. His country was in ruins and the world was eager to see the end of the war. Dönitz knew that his decisions could impact the lives of many. After signing the surrender, Dönitz was taken into the custody by the Allied forces. He was held accountable for his actions during the war, particularly for the use of unrestricted submarine warfare, which had led to the sinking of numerous ships and the loss of many lives. At the Nuremberg trials, he was found guilty of these actions and was sentenced to serve 10 years in prison. During his time in prison, Dönitz had the opportunity to reflect on the consequences of his choices. He had followed orders during the war, but he had also taken steps to prevent further bloodshed when he saw that the war was lost. Some people viewed him as a man who tried to do what he thought was right, while others believed he should have done more to stop the atrocities committed by the Nazi regime. After serving his sentence, Dönitz was released from prison in 1956. He was returned to civilian life, far removed from his days as a naval officer and leader of Nazi Germany. He chose to live a quiet and relatively obscure life, avoiding the spotlight. In his post-war years, Dönitz dedicated himself to writing. He authored a memoir, 10 Years and 20 Days, in which he recounted his experiences during World War II and his time as the last leader of Nazi Germany. The book offered his perspective on the events, decisions, and dilemmas he faced during the tumultuous period. Over time, some historians and scholars revisited Dönitz's legacy, trying to understand the man behind the uniform. While many still condemned his actions during the war, a more nuanced view emerged. Some argued that Dönitz had acted pragmatically in the final days of the war, putting an end to hostilities and saving lives. Others maintained that he was a willing participant in a criminal regime. Dönitz's story is a complex one, marked by the tension between duty, responsibility, and morality. It serves as a stark example of the dilemmas faced by those in positions of power during times of war and conflict. Ultimately, Admiral Karl Dönitz's life teaches us about the ending moral questions that arise in the face of extraordinary circumstances. It reminds us that history is rarely black and white, and that even in the darkest of times, individuals must grapple with their choices and their consequences. As we close the chapter on the story of Admiral Karl Dönitz, we are left with a profound lesson about the complexities of human nature and the difficult decisions that leaders must make in times of crisis.